Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is the voice of Chi-Town, the reddest beard in the high desert, your host of the MOA broadcast, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, we got a great show lined up for you today. All kinds of good stuff, interesting stuff, good stuff, bad stuff, the usual blend, plus, of course, a focus on making it out alive, situational awareness, and survival in the outdoors. A couple of quick highlights. Boy, this is a big one. We're not going to get super deep into. Everyone's covering it, but they're airstrikes in Iran, however you want to say it. If you are hearing this now, it's been recorded on Sunday morning. Chances are you're already fully aware of what's going on in the Middle East, but there were some major strikes. We're going to get into that here momentarily. A naked attack on the highway patrol out of California this time. Knife and map use in the backcountry. Everybody loves to talk about knives. If you go onto the online forums and the outdoor gear and all that kind of stuff, and online places to discuss things, knives are easily one of, if not the single biggest topic for discussion, unless you're on a gun forum. Guns then usually take over, but knives are a big one. And we're going to talk about knives and maps. And another bat attack. A baseball bat this time. So we got a good show. Remember, folks, every week, if you send in an email to info@gearconvoy.com, we take the best suggestion, the best feedback, the best whatever question, answer, this, that, or the other. If the one we put on air and the best one we get, we send out a free mini survival kit too. So don't forget, you got a good idea, you got a question, maybe something you didn't understand, or some feedback. Hey, Wilson, I don't like your face. I don't like your show, whatever. I've heard it all before. You can't possibly hurt my feelings. Anyway, send that to info@gearconvoy.com and get a chance to hear yourself on the air, or your question at least on the air, and get a free mini survival kit. Don't forget, we've had a couple of weeks off, but we're going to be cracking up this week again on the true crime podcast, which we usually do on a weekly basis. Probably be once a week or once every 2 weeks now, though I've got a lot on my plate. So don't forget to tune in. You can catch that at gearconvoy.com, or you can do it through Spotify or Apple, wherever you usually get your podcasts and stuff from. Okay, let's get right to it. U.S. airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The story comes to us from Reuters. And folks, let me just say real quickly, before we jump in here, I'm not going to go into great depth discussing this. We're going to hit the details. What the actual mechanics of what happened are pretty simple as far as what took place physically. I'm not going to get into the politics. Both sides or more of the political spectrum here are going to feel very strongly about this. This isn't a show about politics. Whenever I cover the news, which is pretty frequently, I give you the information and then you make your own decision. If you want politics, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to hear political, viewpoints or whatever else commentary, there are tons. There are plenty of stations and shows and podcasts and radio shows and so forth that cover that. So I don't get into that. I leave that to other people. We just cover the news, and you, again, make your own decision on what you want to believe and how you feel about it. Okay, U.S. forces struck Iran's 3 main nuclear sites, President Donald Trump said late on Saturday. This just happened yesterday. So again, this is being recorded on Sunday. This took place on Saturday, and he warned Tehran it would face more devastating attacks if it does not agree to peace. In a speech that lasted just over 3 minutes, Trump said Iran's future held either peace or tragedy, and there were many other targets that could be hit by the U.S. military. If peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. The president said. The U.S. reached out to Iran diplomatically on Saturday to say the strikes are all the U.S. plans and it does not aim for regime change, CBS News reported. So if you're not familiar with that, basically what they're saying is they're not trying to overthrow. This is what they said. Again, everyone believe what they want to believe and whatever, but this is what they said. They're not planning on regime change, changing the leaders or the structure, whatever else. This was to essentially remove the nuclear capability that Iran has or had or will have or could have or whatever, again, depending on who you believe. And I'm not calling anyone a liar. I'm just saying you can look up anything now, whether it's on X, Twitter, or the news, anywhere on the internet, and anything that you find, you can find someone who said the exact opposite. If you look up, is the sky blue? You're going to get people that say yes and people that say no. Is blood red? Well, yes, and some are going to say no. So you can find any political or otherwise opinion you want now. But that's what the official statement is. And that, again, was supposed to be the point of these airstrikes in Iran, is to destroy their nuclear capability, according to the president and his news desk. Trump said U.S. forces struck Iran's 3 principal nuclear sites. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation. I don't speak this language, but let's go. Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo. He told Fox News' Sean Hannity that 6 bunker buster bombs were dropped on Fordo, while 30 Tomahawk missiles were fired against other nuclear sites. These, if you look it up, these bunker buster bombs, it's insane, the technology in this. The bomb itself, or the whatever they call it, the weapon, whatever, the asset, it weighs 30,000 pounds is the bomb, if what I read was correct. Okay, it's a 30,000-pound bomb. The U.S. B-2 bombers were involved in the strikes, a U.S. official told Reuters, speaking on condition of anonymity. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. Trump posted on Truth Social, Fordo is gone. Now, for those of you that don't know, Truth Social is President Trump's own social, social media, what's the word I'm looking for here, network. It's kind of like his version of X. I guess when he got banned from Twitter or X years ago, that was enough for him to say, okay, we're not doing that again, because he got kicked off and couldn't use his account and everything else. So they started Truth Social. So anyway, that's his social media network. An Iranian official cited by Tasnim news agency confirmed part of the Fordo site was attacked by enemy airstrikes. However, Mohammad Manan Raizi, a lawmaker for Qom, I don't know how to pronounce this, near Fordo, told the semi-official Fars news agency the facility had not been seriously damaged. So I don't know. You believe what you want, yada, yada, yada. That's what happened. They did drop the bombs. Apparently it was 6 of these bunker buster bombs. I encourage you, if you're interested at all in just the technicality, the logistics of that sort of thing, look up those bombs. It is insane. They are massive, and they cause an insane amount of damage. Basically, again, I didn't have time to do an exhaustive research into this. Bombs and munitions aren't really my area of specialty, and I don't have a huge interest in that. But basically, the bomb was designed to burrow or pound or explode its way, tunnel its way underground before it detonates the payload, so they can get to bunkers, things that are hidden underneath or constructed subterranean in a subterranean fashion. So it's pretty amazing the technology they have on these things. Anyway, that's that. I don't know how that would work out as far as all the logistics with the 30,000-pound bombs on these B-2s and whatever else is involved, but that's what sources were reporting. They also stated that there were no signs of contamination after the attacks, so there's no danger to residents living nearby, according to their local news sources. And the enriched uranium reserves had been transferred from the nuclear centers, and there are no materials left there that, if targeted, would cause radiation and be harmful to our compatriots, he told the channel. This was the Mohammad Manan Raizi for Qom, I don't know. Again, no disrespect, wherever your political sources or leanings lie. So anyway, that was a big deal. Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. That's about the end of it. If you look anywhere on the news, on X or Twitter, if you look on Facebook, anywhere and everywhere, print publications, this is all that's going to be talked about for days, weeks, potentially months. So we're not going to spend it all here. And again, it's going to get very political, and that's not the purpose of this show. But it was a big deal. There were all kinds of videos on X of just the explosions, the burning aftermath. It was a big deal, man. And again, this is going to trigger a lot of discussions moving forward. So, okay, we go to the great state of California. As the governor would have said years ago, CHP, which is California Highway Patrol, naked man struggled with officer, assaults nurse. This coming to us from the High Desert Star. Yucca Valley. CHP officers say a naked man found walking on the highway fought with an officer and later sexually assaulted a hospital nurse Saturday, June 14. Eric Chung, 26, of Chula Vista, was charged with attempted murder, sexual battery, assault with a deadly weapon, resisting arrest, and making threats. A judge entered not guilty pleas on his behalf and set bail at $1 million Wednesday. An officer allegedly encountered Chung walking naked on 29 Palms Highway near Laonda Way around 8:10 p.m. on June 14, according to the Morongo Basin CHP. Chung allegedly ignored orders to leave the road. When the officer attempted to physically remove Chung from the road, he resisted. A violent struggle followed. CHP officer Michael Radford said in a news release, a 34-year-old man from Loma Linda saw the fight and intervened, helped the officer gain control and move him off the highway, according to CHP. During the struggle, the aggressor allegedly made violent and sexual threats toward the officer. A San Bernardino County Sheriff Sergeant arrived on scene and helped take him into custody. When he was taken to High Desert Medical Center for treatment of minor injuries, he allegedly sexually assaulted a nurse on duty. This guy was not done for the night, and it's not funny, but man, again, they believe drugs were involved. This is what happens, guys. We live in a society now that is continually encouraging drug use recreationally. This is what happens when the wrong person meets the wrong drugs. So you got to be careful what you put in your body. Investigators believe drugs contributed to Chung's alleged behavior, Radford said. He was the sergeant, I believe. Let's see what happened here next. Lieutenant Thomas Skinner, the commander of the CHP Morongo Basin office, praised the Loma Linda man, who wasn't identified, they didn't give a name for him, who came to the officer's aid. So basically, this guy's walking down the highway, buck naked, allegedly, and a CHP, California Highway Patrol officer, pulls up, tries to get him off the road. He decides, I'm not moving off the road, and they get into a tussle. And then I guess another guy, this 34-year-old gentleman from Loma Linda, saw the fight and intervened to help the officer to get him off the road. Now, the thing, let's go ahead and finish the story here. The gentleman who stopped to show helped a lot of bravery. He said, we believe the injuries to our officer could have been much worse if he had not intervened, and so on and so forth. Now, hang on, let me get a sip here. My throat can use all the help it can get. Now, interesting little point here. This is the opinion part of it. So if you don't want to hear my opinion, you can tune out now or ignore it. I reported the facts. This is my opinion. They seem to be very deliberately not stating whether the officer is male or female. It doesn't really matter for the purpose of this story, but if you're not from the States, if you're not from America, if you're outside the U.S. right now, there is this big struggle, right? And this has been going on for decades, but they've really stepped up the intensity here recently with this whole women can do and be anything that men can do, and so on and so forth. Guys, that's not true. Men are faster as a rule, okay? Men are faster, bigger, faster, stronger, so on and so forth, more aggressive. There are certain attributes that men have that these are biological attributes. They're not really up for debate. If you don't believe it, that's fine. You can believe what you want to believe. But there are certain biological attributes that separate men from women. And this becomes critically important. It's one thing if you're talking about, excuse me, if you're talking about let me get another sip. My apologies. Okay. It's one thing if you're talking about a job as a cashier or some other job that doesn't require extreme physical exertion where someone's life may be on the line. But when you compare men and women and put them in the context of a police officer, highway patrolman, military, whatever else, and where someone's physicality, even a security guard, where someone's physicality may mean the difference between life and death or an escaped convict or felon or a violent person, aggressive person on the loose, all of a sudden the biology does become extremely important, and your beliefs are less important than the biological reality of it all. And again, I just noticed that multiple times they glossed over and just said our officer or the officer or words to that effect instead of saying he or she or this, that, and the other. The reality of it is that men are stronger and better suited for violence. Violence is an ugly thing. I've experienced violence my fair share. I'll put it like that. Violence is ugly. But unfortunately, it is a constant part of life, and for some people in some areas, and especially for jobs like this, a highway patrolman, a police officer. It also stated that the suspect allegedly made sexual threats toward the officer, and then he later sexually assaulted a nurse, also allegedly. Now, I don't know if any of them were female. They may have all been male. I have no idea. But I can tell you this. Again, it doesn't necessarily matter. It could have been all men involved in this. It doesn't really matter. But especially coming out of California, they have their own way of doing things out there, especially when it comes to political persuasions. And again, I'm not going to get political at all. But all you have to do, if you go to your favorite social media site, whether that's YouTube or TikTok or X or I don't know, there's a whole bunch of them now. If you look up what are a female cop compilations on there, what compilations of videos, there are loads of these videos of women just getting physically dominated by, in a lot of cases, weak little men or just average men, just swatting them around like flies. And I can tell you, I have been there personally and seen multiple women swatted down like flies from a backhand, a slap, an open hand strike, or a punch that would have probably barely grazed or affected a male, and it sent the female flying. Now, the reason I bring this up, and we're going to move on, I'm not going to get too deep in this. Everyone has very personal feelings about this, even though this is really a scientific discussion as to whether or not men are better suited for violence against other men. But whatever. What happens whenever that woman, there was just a video I saw the other day, okay? There were two women trying to take down this one guy, and he was they were cops. It was two female cops taking down this one guy outside of a gas station or whatever. He was beating the tar out of these two women. And finally, it got to where the one woman was the officer. She was so tired, she couldn't fight anymore. And she just sat there on the ground while this guy is beating the tar out of another woman, another female officer. That is the problem. And guess what happened? A male showed up, and I'm not saying all males are superior. Guys, listen, I'm a man, okay, but there are plenty of worthless, pathetic men in the world. I am not trying to go on some male, crusade here. But this guy showed up. In about 3 seconds, he dominated and handled this suspect, put him face down, cuffed him, and stuffed him in a car, and it was over. And that female cop took a beating. I mean, she was messed up. I'll guarantee you she went to the hospital. So, this is not to derogate or denigrate women at all, but you got to question sometimes if this is the best role for them for a variety of reasons. Let's go ahead and put a pin on this. The bottom line is when you send women in to fight men, you're going to have problems, period. So we'll leave it at that and we move on. All right, now, since we're talking about cops, I've talked about this a couple of times. I am extremely pro law enforcement. Believe me, if you've ever been in a disturbance or a riot or whatever else where it's pure bedlam, trust me, you do not want anarchy. You may think you do, but you do not. It is and I'm not talking to the majority of people. There are some people out there that are, self-described anarchists, and there are some people who just hate the system. They're angry or frustrated or whatever. They just want to see things burn. The problem with that is it's only a matter of time till something you care about burns in those situations. We saw this in California recently. That being said, I'm very pro law enforcement. The problem is you can't control all the cops that are in law enforcement. There are a lot of good officers. I've witnessed some very, very good things, and I've worked alongside and around some very, very good people, and that's fantastic. But you never know how the power is going to go to someone's head. When you put a cop on the street, you're giving him a firearm and literally the ability to enforce sometimes his opinion with lethal force. Now, it may later get overturned in the courts and the ship gets set aright again, but on the street that night, I'll tell you what my dad used to tell me, don't argue with cops on the street. Argue in the courtroom. You're going to lose on the street every time. And that's really what it boils down to. Brief story. I told one a couple of weeks ago or a couple of episodes ago about this time I got pulled over for allegedly running a stop sign that didn't exist, and the next day they went in and put a brand new stop sign. Unfortunately, I took photographs before and after, and I beat the ticket. Okay, but that kind of stuff happens. That's dirty. I don't care who you are. I'm not anti anything other than anti dirty. That's dirty. So this one time, several years ago, I got pulled over I'll keep this extremely brief because we're already blowing way over our time on this. But I got pulled over. I saw this cop. I was driving in the city, and I was pulling out of a parking lot, and I saw the cop before I even exited the parking lot. I'm like, okay, even though it was all city driving on surface streets like 20 miles or less, 20 miles an hour or less, and I was just going down the block, I went ahead, I'm like, I better put my seatbelt on. So before I exited the parking lot of the business that I was in, where I was technically still on private property, I put my seatbelt on. And I'm watching this cop who's probably 10 to 20 meters away from me, just sitting in a parking lot, watching me and other people go by. Okay, so as soon as I get out on the street, he lights me up. And I'm like, I can't believe this. Pulls me over. He walks up and I'm like, is there a problem, officer? And he goes, you're not wearing your seatbelt. And I look down and I'm like, clearly I'm wearing my seatbelt. He goes, yeah, I saw you putting it on. And so I just said to the guy straight up, man to man, I'm like, sir, what are you really doing? Is this really helping the community by just enforcing this rule on some petty little level? Or are you trying to help and better your community out? Words to that effect. I don't remember, this was years ago, but that was basically what it was. I go, you saw me putting my seatbelt on before I entered the roadway, and I'm wearing my seatbelt, and I wasn't speeding, I wasn't doing anything dangerous, and you still decided to pull me over. And this, of course, made the cop furious. So what did he do? He went on a rampage and looked for every single thing he could write me up on. He came back. He was in his truck or his SUV, whatever you want to call it, for 15 minutes. He comes back with a ticket for over $1,200. And I'm like, are you insane? Anyways, long story short, while he went back to go process the ticket or whatever it is, his computer died and it refused or it failed to print out the ticket for him. And since he couldn't produce the ticket at that time, I couldn't be charged with it. So he basically, I got off. He was mad about it. I mean, he was upset. And he gave me I go, listen, give me your card, because if this goes through the system, I'm going to need your name. And so sure enough, a couple of months later, or a couple of weeks, I don't remember when it was, I got this letter in the mail that I was basically, there was a warrant out for my arrest, or I can't remember what it was, but it was a lot of money and I was out for a warrant for my arrest. And I did contact him by email and tell him, listen, that ticket went through, and basically it showed that I had missed my court date. So now I was up for arrest. And to be fair to the guy, he went in and took care of it. Within 24 hours, the whole thing disappeared. But that is the problem. You never know which officer you're going to get. And that's the thing with these First Amendment auditors. I've talked about these before. Man, some of this stuff is insane. These guys, some of them are definitely provocative. They try and provoke the officers. They try and provoke the people they film. If you're not familiar, First Amendment auditors here in the U.S., they will take their phones, or some of them have elaborate camera setups. And I'm not saying I'm against it, but you got to look at the whole thing in context. They will walk up and film things like cops doing their job. They will walk up and film banks. They'll film storefronts. And for some reason, a lot of people freak out when they see a camera, and they call the cops, and the cops show up, and the cops frequently, sometimes they do a really, really good job. They have been aware of the legal vicissitudes that are involved in filming in public and the First Amendment rights here in the United States. But some of them just go bonkers, and they arrest people, they slam them, they tase them, they pepper spray them for literally breaking no laws at all. They don't like the way it makes them feel, and they go bonkers. That is the problem that arises. That's where the issue, the rub is, in my mind, with the law enforcement. It's not law enforcement itself. It's certain officers that just literally, they red zone is what we used to call. I don't know what they call it now, but they freak out, and they fixate on some person, and they exceed their authority dramatically. Now, excuse me one second while I get a sip. Where you see this correction take place is in the few people that will actually sue the police station or the city, the police force, whatever it winds up being, the individual officers. When these officers get deposed by lawyers, the ones that have acted in an insane fashion, it's an extreme role reversal They're sitting there staring at the ceiling. They're looking around. I don't know. Oh, they say, I don't know. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't recall. So, it's a very difficult thing with the checks and balances. It sometimes becomes difficult to separate the bad law enforcement officers, which are probably a minority. We see it. We only hear about the negative ones. No YouTuber or First Amendment auditor, I shouldn't say no, the majority of them aren't going to want to sit there and post positive videos because that doesn't get as many clicks or views as a cop that goes berserk. And some of them do go berserk, but there are probably 10 or 50 or 100 times more interactions where the cop does the right thing. But we're never going to see that video because no one wants to watch that. They want to watch a cop flip out and hope somebody gets a lawsuit. So anyway, it's a very, very complex situation. Probably all over the world, America has their own set of laws and checks and balances and constitutional rights. It's a very interesting situation. So it is what it is. Yeah, you gotta, it's very, but when you watch some of these officers that go bonkers, when you watch them get deposed, it's crazy. Some of them absolutely, like they are so frustrated that they are not in control. Because if you've ever been deposed before, it's not the same as being in court, but you're basically under oath. And you don't have certain, it's not like being in court where your lawyer can just say, I object this and that. I don't know all the ins and outs. But again, if you've ever been deposed, it's you. You are alone. You're sitting there in a chair, and there's a lawyer and some other people while you're being usually videotaped and audio recorded, and they're just asking you questions, and you have to answer for it and stand on what you say. They were so confident on the street when they were depriving you of your rights. But when they got that video camera and a couple of lawyers staring them in the face, all of a sudden, they tend to become very sheepish. So it is what it is. You know what? Let's go ahead. After this, I watched a great movie the other day. I love old movies. I want to talk about in this one or in this episode. I don't want to sound, what's the word? I hate to use the word prejudiced, but biased maybe against so much of what the movies and the TV shows that come out now. They're almost painful to watch to me. When you look at a lot of the stuff that was produced in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, man, there was some really good, very real, raw feeling movies that had a powerful message or were just very entertaining, and they didn't worry about being overly polished, overly politically correct, anything. So I have a hard time watching even the 90s had some really good stuff. Let's not get it twisted. But anything starting around the 2000s moving on, I don't know that I've seen other than maybe movies that I can count on my own two hands, 10 or less films that have been produced in the last 10, 15 years that I've really enjoyed and thought very highly of. Doesn't mean they don't exist. It just means I haven't seen them. So anyway, we're going to discuss a fantastic film when I get back from the break. We'll see you then, folks. More Make It Out Alive with Sam Wilson after this.
The roads around Klamath Falls aren't just blacktop and signs. They're part of our lives. They connect schools, parks, neighborhoods, and friends. Every crosswalk tells a story. Every intersection holds someone's future. So when you drive, slow down. Stay alert. Watch out for kids, bikes, and neighbors. Put down the phone. And remember that the life you save could be someone you know. Drive like you live here. Because you do. And because communities worth protecting.
You're listening to the MOA broadcast with Sam Wilson. Will you make it out alive? And we are back from the break. It is time for more Make It Out Alive with your host, Sam Wilson. All right, folks, where we left off. So I checked on an X on Twitter during the break. The operation where the U.S. bombed Iran is now being called Operation Midnight Hammer, if what I read was accurate. And man, the news feed on a lot of the social media is already just filling up with Iran, whatever you want to call it. No disrespect, just, that's not what they say over there. It's like when people argue about Moscow or Moscow, they don't say that in Russian. So let's not get into too much of an argument over how it's pronounced in English when that's not how it's said in the actual location. Anyway, talking about retaliation from Iran. So it's going to be interesting in the next couple of days and weeks. Keep your eyes peeled, folks. It's going to be interesting. All right. We were also talking before the break about a great film. Now, this is one of my personal favorites. I try and work in some of this personal stuff occasionally because people email me and ask me some of this stuff and want to talk about it in either via email or via the show. And so I figured maybe other people are interested. Maybe they aren't. One of my favorite films is a film from the 60s. When was it? Let's see. Came out in the 70s. Came out in 73. Okay. It was a film called Scorpio. Now, I'm a big Burt Lancaster fan. I didn't like all of his movies; they weren't all my cup of tea. All of his characters, but when he really shined, when he really nailed it for certain things, it really struck a chord with me. And this is one of those films. He plays a guy named Cross. I forget his first name. It's a fantastic film, spy film. Okay, from the 70s. So you got Burt Lancaster playing the Cross character, the quote unquote good guy, if you want to call him that. They're all spies. So there's a lot of moral ambiguity here. And the quote unquote bad guy is played by Alain Delon. So he's a French actor. He was very, very good in some things, and he was extremely hot at the time. And he was a real, a sex icon and all this kind of stuff. Women were just swooning over him. But he could back it up. He had some good. I saw him in a film with, I believe it was Charles Bronson, where they were trying to crack a safe or break into some place and steal. I forget what it was called. It was kind of an odd movie. The juxtaposition of Charles Bronson, and Alain Delon, and I'm probably butchering his name. Sorry for those of you that speak French properly. But it was a really good film. Kind of a different feel for Bronson. It had a very European feel to it. Let me put it like that. But it was a good film. Scorpio, I like 10 times better. It was a very, very good film. Now, Burt Lancaster in this, he did his own, all of or most of, I don't know, I'm sure there was probably a stand-in or a stunt double somewhere. But this was a great cat and mouse film. And he did almost or most of his own stunts. And I say this confidently because there are several scenes where you can clearly see his face and his build doing the stunts. There are some good running and jumping and shooting and climbing sequences in this film. Now, at this point, just to go ahead and fill you in, Delon is probably, I don't know, he's probably in his 30s, if that, in this film. So he's definitely the young guy. And Cross plays the old timer who's been working for the CIA for like 30 years or whatever it is. And he's been training Alain Delon and again, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, he's been training him for a couple of years on multiple missions. He's basically kind of training him to be his replacement at some point. Okay. So I'm not going to spoil the whole film, but what happens is Lancaster's character decides he wants to get out of the CIA and go retire. Well, when that happens, they decide he's too dangerous to let go. So they send in his protege. And there's kind of a typical, or not typical, but a not uncommon, theme in spy films, to go in there and assassinate him. Okay, so Delon's character, even though he was trained by Burt Lancaster's character, is now tasked with assassinating him. The interesting thing is he doesn't really want to do it. He doesn't have a personal problem. He's a good spy. He doesn't have a personal problem with Cross, but he has to do it because sooner or later, the bottom line is, I won't spoil the whole film, but it comes down to a game of survival. Somebody's got to go. Okay. But there are a couple of running and jumping and chasing scenes where Burt Lancaster, get a load of this. This film was released in 1973. I don't know when exactly it was filmed and cut and post-production and all that, but let's just say 70 through 73. Burt Lancaster was born in 1913. If I got that correct, is that? Yeah. He's a New Yorker, straight out of New York, New York. Born in 1913. That means he was 60 to 62 while he was filming this film. Now he's definitely, his age was shown a little bit. He was carried a little bit more around the midsection. He didn't appear as youthful, but he's 60 something years old. You wouldn't expect him to. He was in phenomenal condition. You would not believe that this guy, there's no CGI in these films. This is 1973. You would not believe this guy is 60 or 60 something years old. And I did a little research years ago because Burt Lancaster, another one of his films, is one of my absolute favorites. I've talked about it before on the show. It was called Lawman. I love Westerns. Lawman with Burt Lancaster and a really nice ensemble cast, including, even though he wasn't a big deal at the time, Robert Duvall. Really, really good film. But Burt Lancaster used to be in the circus and as an acrobat. in the 30s before he went and served in World War II, okay, in the military. So this guy he had been there and done that. He wasn't just some Hollywood guy bouncing around on a screen and doing green screen CGI, which didn't exist, of course, at the time. Not as we know it anyway. I really respect the fact that he was in great shape. And if you watch that film, you can see he is doing some of his own running, jumping, climbing, and rolling and so forth. It's pretty impressive. Anyway, really good film. If you ever get a chance, watch it. Scorpio, 1973, I believe, with Burt Lancaster, Alain Delon, and a few other names you would know. What was the guy's name? I want to say Cannon, J.D. Cannon, John Cannon. Anyway, Cannon, he also played, I recognize him immediately because he played in a lot of things, but he was also with Burt Lancaster in Lawman, was in the film. He kind of plays the secret bad guy you don't really know until the end, in a way. So, great film. Let's get moving, though. We go back to New York. Speaking of New York City, where Burt Lancaster was born, we go back to New York City, New York. We're going to have to blend these two stories together and get crack-a-lackin' because we are running out of time. We'll do the headline here. A veteran writing an MTA. So for those of you outside of New York, MTA stands for Metro Transit Authority. Oftentimes people won't say, take the bus, take the train. They'll say, I'm taking MTA. That's New York. I don't know about other cities. I know in Boston they call it the T, I believe. I don't know, the train they used to. The tokens even used to have like a little T punched out of them or stamped out of them. But anyway, I'm getting off track. Veteran riding MTA bus stabbed in the neck and eye with a pin. This comes to us from PIX 11. I don't know where they're based out of. That was where I got the story from. Out of Manhattan, New York. A man accused of stabbing a bus rider in the eye and neck with a pin, a writing pin, I guess, by the way the spelling, was indicted on Tuesday. Queens DA Melinda Katz announced. Cordero Rosario, 29, of Manhattan, was charged with attempted murder in the second degree. So basically what happened is the alleged aggressor, Rosario, he got on the bus. He began to act erratically while he was riding the bus, and he intentionally stepped on the foot of a female passenger as she got up to get off the bus, allegedly, according to court documents. When the 59-year-old victim, I guess this guy was just sitting there, this veteran, 59-year-old man, confronted Rosario, he stabbed the guy in the neck with a pin, allegedly. Then he continued to stab the victim in the right eye and said, I'll kill you, according to court documents. So this goes back to New York, man. It's just crazy. I used to enjoy riding the MTA, whether it was train or bus. They really have a very, very phenomenal level of coverage with their system there. Sounds like it's pretty dangerous now, but I mean, it used to be dangerous back in the day. Things come and go. But again, you couldn't pay me to live in New York right now. The victim is still receiving treatment, and unfortunately may lose sight in the eye, officials say. The alleged aggressor, Rosario, is due back in court on July 24 and faces up to 25 years in prison if convicted. Now, we do a hop, skip, and a jump over the river from Manhattan into Brooklyn for our next story. MTA bus driver, 71, beaten with a wrench while working in Brooklyn. According to the NYPD, this comes to us from WPIX NYC. Brooklyn, New York. An on-duty MTA bus driver was beaten with a wrench in Brooklyn, according to the NYPD. Police said it happened near Lorraine and Hicks Street around 8 a.m. The 71-year-old employee was driving a B61 bus when the suspect boarded the bus. Police said the suspect, a man, got into an argument with a bus driver and then allegedly pulled out a wrench and struck the driver in the forehead and whipped him with the wrench, allegedly, according to authorities. Police said the suspect then fled on a scooter. The victim was taken to a local hospital for minor injuries, according to authorities. Folks, we're not just doing this for shock value, and we're not just doing this to pick on New York City. One of the things we talk about that's been a constant theme of the MOA broadcast is situational awareness. Now, that's not always going to help you. Sometimes you're put into a situation where there is literally only one or two options or fewer, and none of them are good, and you have to act, or you're going to get acted upon. But man, be looking at this stuff a lot of times. I mean, I rode the bus and the train a lot in New York City and several other cities. Not always, but frequently you can tell a troublemaker or someone who's about to do something phenomenally stupid or violent before it happens. Put some space between them and you give yourself reaction time. Get off if you have to. Believe me, it's like when people get into road rage incidents. These come up all the time on social media, like on X or TikTok. People get into this road rage incident and they allow themselves, and we've all probably been there. You allow yourself to get, and I've done some stupid things, and it's like, why? Just keep on going, man. Forget it. You let yourself get caught up in the moment and swept up into the emotion of it all, or you're not paying attention and you find yourself all of a sudden in this perfect storm of bad circumstances. Get out of there. It's not worth it. They want to walk around and stomp around like they're king of the hill, or they own the bus or the road or whatever. Let the police deal with them. Very, very rarely does something good come. I mean, if you have to help someone else out or stand up for yourself, obviously you have to make that determination in the moment. But man, don't get caught up into. And that's not what happened with these bus drivers. Don't get me confused or mistaken here. But man, get away from those kind of people. It's a mess. Okay, we go on to the state of Maine here in the U.S. Missing father and daughter found dead at Maine's Mount Katahdin, according to KPTV. Coming to us out of the state of Maine, a 58-year-old man and his 28-year-old daughter have both been found dead following a morning hike to Maine's Mount Katahdin over the weekend. The pair from Ulster Park, New York, were last seen leaving their campground at Baxter State Park and on the way to the mountain summit just after 10 a.m. on June 1, officials said. Excuse me momentarily. Okay. For some context here, some reference, Mount Katahdin is the highest mountain in Maine and is located within Baxter State Park. It is 5,270 feet in elevation, and some sources, I did a little research on this before I ran the story. The average round trip, according to some sources, one of which was, I believe, Baxter State Park itself, the round trip to go up and down, allegedly, from what I understand, from Mount Katahdin is 8 to 12 hours. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on what loop you take, what route you take, where you start, where you finish. But this is not an overly insane or aggressive hike under most circumstances. We don't know exactly what happened with these folks yet. Let's continue with the story. The SAR, search and rescue mission for the Keterlings. Did they give the names? Yeah, we get to that in a minute here. The Keterlings began the next day after their vehicle was spotted in the day-use parking lot. So there were park rangers, canine, game wardens, Maine Forest Service. They had the National Guard had Black Hawk and Lakota helicopters with thermal imaging technology. Unfortunately, out there to find, it became a recovery mission in the middle of the SAR. Tim Keterling, he is the father. He is 50. Where to go? 58. Was found near the summit on Tuesday, June 3rd at about 2:45 p.m. local time. He was located by a Maine Warden Service canine search team on the tableland near the summit of Katahdin. His cause of death is still pending further studies, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner told WABI. They found his daughter, Esther, who was only 28 years old. So a father and daughter were out here hiking. He was 58, she was 28. They found her dead the following day in a boulder area between the Cathedral and Saddle Trails off the tablelands, about 1,000 feet from where her father was found. The medical examiner says Esther, 28, died from blunt force injuries. It appears she continued downhill off trail and tried to traverse the boulder area, which was steep and snow-covered, and slid downhill until she hit large boulders. Based on the weather conditions on June 1, the officials believe the snowfield was likely icy and almost impossible to navigate without proper gear. The bad thing about, we don't know exactly what happened. What we do know is this 58-year-old man and his 28-year-old daughter, they went for this hike. I read several articles on this. They love to hike, and they love Mount Katahdin, apparently. Something happened, and the father, it appears, was close to the summit. The daughter somehow was lower in elevation. I don't know if she turned back. She may have gotten altitude sickness. It wasn't that it's like 5,200 something feet high. That's not that high of a mountain. I live at 4,200 feet here in the hills of Southern Oregon. So I doubt altitude sickness was it, but you never know. There appears snow and ice could have been a factor. Either way, unfortunately, both of them passed, and they are still trying to find out. Due to the blunt force injuries, Esther, the daughter, who knows, she may have slid down the snow or ice and banged her head along the way. Unfortunately, falls are a huge killer of people in the outdoors. She wrote on her Substack, I'm not familiar with this, I guess it's a social media platform. She wrote about her plans to hike Mount Katahdin with her father in a Substack entry. Her blog, Keep the Banner Flying, is currently private. I'm a little nervous after everything I've read about the Able Trail, but I'm going to do it if weather permits. She reportedly wrote, if you don't see me back on Substack notes again, that's where I am. Unfortunately, she did not make it back from that trip. This kind of reminds me of Devil's Peak here in Oregon. I mentioned before on different episodes that I've hiked that multiple times. Backpack there. It's roughly the same elevation as Katahdin. It's about 5,000, I think 5,050, maybe 5,075 feet, depending on what reference you look at. Although I'm sure there are plenty of differences. I'm not equating the two, identically. But, you got to realize, folks, at elevation, you have to be particularly prepared. The higher up you go, things can change on a dime. I started hiking, and I know it was a fall trip because of the temperature, and I have my fall hiking gear on. And it was basically just in Oregon, we don't usually get lots of thunderstorms, depending on where you're at. It's like a steady mist or a rain, light rain that just doesn't stop. By the time I got to about 4,000, 5,000 feet, I was soaked through on the outside. I still had a few dry spots on me because I was prepared, clothing-wise. You know what they say, there's no such thing as inclement weather, only inappropriate clothing. Okay. And I was prepared properly. But everything was wet. And I remember climbing up on my hands and knees on some of these, small inclines in the dirt, the mud, the gravel, and so forth. But when I got around that 4,800 to 5,000 feet mark, there had been, snow, a lot of precipitation at that level, that altitude, and everything was snowed and iced out. It's iced over everything and frozen it over. And so I was on this flat plateau right around the 5,000 foot mark. And there was also a bluff right there. I could have slid right off of that ice, off the bluff and gone, and no one would have known that I was there. Fortunately, when I saw that, I was forced to get down on my hands, on my stomach, hands and knees, and crawl around. But the point that I'm making is this: the preparation. I don't know what these folks did, and no disrespect to them. They're going through a mourning period, their family is, and their community. So we're going to leave them out of this. But I was exceptionally, in my opinion, exceptionally well prepared. Multiple people knew my rough whereabouts and when to expect a phone call or a text message back from me. And I had taken the maps. Not only did I have the paper maps on me, I had downloaded the maps electronically onto my GPS of my phone, and then downloaded them also onto my GPS watch. So I had at least 3 different ways of navigating here with map and compass, GPS phone, GPS watch, etc., to get around. If I hadn't done that, though, the trail, the point that I'm making here is the trail, when you get at elevation, when it's snow and ice, it was gone. It's a complete whiteout. All you see is a field of white. And this was only at 5,000 something feet. That's not that high. So if I hadn't prepared that way with the maps and the navigation, I would have been in serious trouble. But I pulled up my maps. I did it with map and compass first, and then I thought, let me double check it with the electronics on my phone. They both did the same thing, and I proceeded. Within a few minutes, I was back to solid ground, and I was back on the trail. But there was no trail markers. Everything was covered in snow and ice. So you have to really be careful about this and take all these preparations, because if you had just based the hike on the first, several hours, up to 4,000 feet or so, it was extremely easy. Almost anybody could have done it, except for I had a 30-something pound pack on me because I was going for multiple days. But as far as, it wasn't like it was technical climbing or anything else. Then all of a sudden you hit the snow line. Everything was covered in ice and snow. I remember very clearly, it was very difficult to start a fire that night. I had to start a particular type of fire to warm me out and get the logs burning. And I was soaked through, because by that point, even with all my waterproof and water resistant gear, I was soaked to the skin. Okay. And I remember it took me multiple cups of coffee around a roaring fire, to just get the chill out and get my internal temp back up where it needed to be. But it took me the better part of an hour to get a quality fire going. It was not the easiest of circumstances. If I hadn't been prepared, I would have been in very, very serious trouble, or I may have wound up being a news item like some other folks. So you got to really take this seriously. Okay, we were going to get into knives and so forth. All right, serrations and saw teeth. I get this question a number of times. A number of my knives, I make hollow handle. That's what I specialize in, is hollow handle survival knives. So these are based primarily on the knives from the 80s, particularly the Rambo style knives and so forth. Only these are made exceptionally high quality, unlike a lot of the flea market stuff that was produced in the 80s. So a lot of my knives have saw teeth, and I'll tell you, whether it makes sense or not, I can take the same knife and add saw teeth to it, and it will sell 2 or 3 to 1 better because it has saw teeth. I'm not knocking anyone. I'm not criticizing anyone. Just an interesting data point from the market. Okay, so what do? So for those of you that don't know, saw teeth are going to be on the spine. That's the back of the knife, the opposite side of the knife from the edge. Saw teeth are used primarily to saw. Really, where they really shine is to make notches and to make sawdust for either making notches for traps or other constructs, or generating sawdust to start a fire with. Pardon me. Saw teeth have we're back here. Saw teeth do have a very particular, they're effective for very certain things. Primarily, again, making notches. Where they really shine probably the most is generating tinder dust to start a fire with, okay? Otherwise, you're not going to be using saw teeth, despite what you see in the movies. You're not going to use saw teeth on the spine of a knife to cut through barbed wire fences, to, chop down trees or saw down trees, whatever else. When you use it to saw, it's very labor intensive because most knives with saw teeth are 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch thick. And that means you have a kerf. The kerf is the part of the cut that is removed due to the thickness of the knife blade or saw blade. Okay? On thicker knives like that, the kerf is larger. It's not going to be as effective. It's going to require a lot of energy expenditure because the wood is binding on the saw. So saw teeth are really for doing that. Serrations, on the other hand, are very different. Serrations are usually on the cutting edge of the knife, and these are like those scallops or those serrated edges. So where these really come into play and where they really shine is these are fantastic at continuing to cut even when they're dull, because like saw teeth, they will rip and tear, unlike a plain edge knife that just cuts with the sharpness of it. Serrations will continue to cut effectively, or rip and tear at least, even when they're dull. So I'm a big fan of serrations. I've mentioned this before. I don't put them on my knife because a lot of guys or a lot of people don't like them on there for a variety of reasons we won't get into today. It's a long story. They don't like them, so I have to make what's going to sell if I want to stay in business. And, it is what it is. But serrations are a great thing. Now, I'm running out of time here, but I wanted to get to sharpening. Sharpening serrations is not that difficult. The easiest way to do this, and we got to move on to our final story. We'll bring this up again next week and make a feature out of it. The easiest way probably is to take a chopstick or one of those, skewer, like those wooden skewers that is close to the size of your particular serrations, and you wrap some 220 or some 320 grit sandpaper on there, and then you can sharpen your serrations on that sandpaper and then give it a quick pass safely. You need experience if you've never used a buffer, but a buffer or a power strop will then strop those serrations back up, and you will be shaving hair in no time. Obviously I'm a knife maker. I have a series of a variety of machines here in my shop. When I sharpen serrations, typically it takes me no longer than the straight edge, if not less, of a knife to sharpen the serrations and get them to where they'll literally shave hair and slice copy paper easily. So don't underestimate the value of serrations on a knife. And I got to skip the last two parts. This was a really good, couple of good stories and some good points. We'll move on to that next week, though, and we'll come back and address this again. For now, we go to, you guessed it, folks, Florida. This comes to us from the Tampa Free Press. If I pull the source properly, parking spat escalates to bat attack. That's baseball bat in a Winter Haven man who is ready for prison. We go to Winter Haven, Florida. A dispute over a parking space escalated dramatically yesterday, leading to a violent home invasion. a violent home invasion, and the arrest of a Winter Haven man who, according to the victim, shouted that he was ready to go back to prison. Thank you, Florida, the state that keeps on giving. At approximately 8:33 p.m. on Wednesday, Polk County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to an aggravated battery complaint in the Florence Villa neighborhood. The victim recounted 2 terrifying encounters with 58-year-old, probably going to pronounce this wrong, I'm going to go by the way it looks, 58-year-old Luscious Smith throughout the day. The first incident, reportedly triggered by a parking space disagreement, saw Luscious allegedly striking the victim's door and mailbox with a baseball bat. However, the situation took a much more sinister turn hours later. The victim had gone home and I guess took a nap, and then she woke up and found Luscious inside of her residence. Again, armed with a baseball bat. She reported that Smith repeatedly struck her with the ball bat, before vandalizing her home, smashing a glass table and a flower pot. Luscious was angry, allegedly, folks. During the attack, the victim stated that Luscious confessed his desire to return to prison, a place he's been 3 times before. You can't make this up. Deputies quickly located Luscious Smith at his residence, where he surrendered without incident. He was then transported to the sheriff's processing center. Luscious now faces a litany of serious charges, including armed burglary with battery, aggravated battery with a deadly weapon, battery, prior conviction, and 2 counts of criminal mischief. Now, this is the newspaper, not me. Given his past record and the nature of these new charges, it appears Luscious may very well get his wish to return to prison. Okay, that's it, folks. That's going to call it a wrap for today. Don't wait until you have an emergency to prepare. If you wait, it may be too late. If you don't make it out alive, you don't make it out at all. Stay safe out there, folks.